Senator Slotkin just delivered a chilling assessment that should terrify anyone who values military independence. She accused the Defense Department of conducting what intelligence agencies would classify as a purge. 17 general officers removed in just 9 months for giving advice leadership didn't want to hear. This isn't normal turnover. It's systematic elimination of dissent in America's nuclear command.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Senator. Welcome. Congratulations on the nomination to you and your family. And you're getting a little preview of how dicey your job is going to be with the president's announcement like 18 hours before you came up here. So I can imagine your poor staff, their briefs changed from last night to today. I think anyone who's coming up here to take an important position like the head of STRATCOM in charge of 41,000 people, it's an extremely big deal. Out of a military of 1.3 million people, we only have 38 four-star generals. I think it's a very rare thing to be a four-star in the U.S. military. And it's hard to notice that we are losing 4 stars, 3 stars, and even 2 stars in a pretty unusual way over the last 9 months. Just in those months, we have lost the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, Chief of Naval Operations, Commander of Cybercom and Director of NSA, Commander of Southcom, Commandant of the Coast Guard, the SMA to the SecDef, the Director of DIA, Naval Special Warfare Commander, the top Army lawyer, the top Air Force lawyer, representative to NATO, the Joint Staff Director for J5, the Joint Staff J3, and the Chief of Naval Research. By my count, that is 17 GOFOs, general officers, who have been removed from their positions or retired early in 9 months. I'm a former CIA officer, so we used to look at other foreign militaries and make assessments on them. If I saw 17 general officers removed from their positions in a foreign military, we would call that a purge. That's the technical definition when a new leader comes in and just cleans house. The places where we've looked at these kinds of things are places like China, right, where they remove large numbers of officers at one time. I used to work on Iraq. They would do the same thing. It is very clear that the Secretary of Defense is trying to reshape the department in ways that are very different than previous administrations, and he is critical of anyone who takes issue with him, his leadership, or decision-making of him or the president. Now, you've repeated many times, rightly, that your job will be to give best military advice. But what we are seeing over and over in black and white is that when people in similar positions give their best military advice, they get removed. If that military advice is somehow not in line with the thinking of this president and the secretary, you get fired. So there's going to come a moment. I don't know when it's going to be. I hope you never have it, but there will be a moment behind closed doors, not when the lights are on and the hearings going on, when you will have that really existential decision you will have to make. Do I give my best military advice and tell people news they don't want to hear, information they don't want to hear, or will I just go along to get along to make sure that my bosses are happy and I don't rock the boat? You swore an oath over and over your whole career to the Constitution, not to any one man, not to one president, but to the Constitution of the United States. So can you say with conviction, when your moment comes, because it's coming, you're behind closed doors and you have that moral and professional obligation to make, that you, at risk, knowing that your job is at risk, you will say the right and best military advice based on facts and not just what Secretary Hegseth wants you to say?
Senator, over the course of my career, I've adhered to that principle, and I will adhere to that principle going forward, consistent with my oath to the Constitution.
Well, we are counting on it, and we've had every single nominee come up and say the same thing. I've asked this question to pretty much every single nominee that's come up before me. But those moments are happening, and I think we can see just by the sheer number, 17 general officers removed in 9 months, that you will have that career-defining moment. And because your job involves nuclear weapons, there couldn't be a more important set of issues to work on when it comes to sort of moral decision-making. We are counting on you. The young folks who work for you, those 41,000 people, are counting on you to make the right decision when the doors are closed. So thank you, and I encourage you all of Godspeed.
What Senator Slotkin did in that hearing wasn't just political theater. It was a former CIA officer applying the same analytical framework she once used to assess foreign militaries to our own Defense Department. And her conclusion should unnerve anyone who understands how civilian-military relations work in a democracy. 17 general officers removed or forced into early retirement in 9 months. Slotkin didn't just throw that number around for effect. She methodically listed names and positions: Chairman of Joint Chiefs, Air Force Chief of Staff, Naval Operations Chief, Cyber Command, NSA Director. These aren't middle management shuffles. These are the people who run America's most critical defense operations. In intelligence analysis, pattern recognition matters more than individual incidents. When you see systematic removal of senior leadership across multiple service branches and commands, you're not looking at normal turnover. You're looking at what professionals call institutional capture. Slotkin's background matters here. CIA officers are trained to identify when foreign governments consolidate control over their militaries. The markers are consistent: rapid leadership changes, removal of dissenting officers, replacement with political loyalists. She compared this to China and Iraq, professional assessments based on intelligence work studying how authoritarian systems neutralize independent military advice. When Xi Jinping purged military officers, it consolidated personal control. When Saddam replaced professional officers with Ba'ath loyalists, it weakened effectiveness but strengthened political control. Slotkin applies the same lens to American patterns. The deeper issue Slotkin raised isn't about personnel changes, it's about the oath military officers take. They swear allegiance to the Constitution, not to any individual leader. That distinction exists precisely to prevent the military from becoming a personal instrument of whoever holds power. When senior officers are systematically removed for giving advice that contradicts political preferences, you create what military scholars call a chilling effect. Lower-ranking officers learn that candor equals career suicide. Professional military judgment gets replaced by political calculation. Slotkin wasn't randomly picking on this nominee. Strategic command controls America's nuclear arsenal. These are life-and-death decisions that require absolute professional integrity. When you have 17 examples of officers being removed for giving unwelcome advice, how do you maintain the independence needed for nuclear decision-making? The stakes here aren't abstract. Nuclear command requires officers who will say no when civilian leadership makes dangerous requests. If those officers know that honesty leads to termination, the system breaks down in ways that threaten global security. Consider the Cuban Missile Crisis, when military advisors pushed for immediate strikes while cooler heads prevailed through honest debate. American civil-military relations depend on a delicate balance. Civilian control ensures democratic accountability, but military officers must retain enough independence to provide honest professional advice. When that balance tilts too far toward political loyalty, you get military establishments that tell leaders what they want to hear rather than what they need to know. History shows this pattern repeatedly. Military establishments that prioritize loyalty over competence tend to fail when tested. The officers who remain are those skilled at political survival, not necessarily those best equipped to handle military crises. Slotkin's warning wasn't really directed at the nominee. It was about the system he's entering. When institutional norms break down, individual integrity becomes the only safeguard. But expecting individuals to sacrifice their careers for principle isn't a sustainable system of governance. The pattern she identified suggests something more troubling than normal political transitions. It suggests systematic replacement of professional military culture with partisan loyalty. That transformation doesn't happen overnight, but 17 senior officers in 9 months represent significant acceleration. The fundamental question isn't whether this particular nominee will maintain his integrity. It's whether the institutional environment allows for professional independence at all. When dissent consistently leads to removal, you're not just losing individual officers, you're losing the institutional culture that produces honest military advice. This isn't just about personalities or politics, it's about operational readiness. These 17 officers represented decades of combined experience in everything from counterterrorism to nuclear strategy to cyber warfare. You can't replace that institutional memory overnight. When you force out a Navy admiral with 30 years of experience because he questioned a policy decision, you're not just silencing one voice, you're losing 3 decades of accumulated knowledge about maritime threats, alliance relationships, and crisis management. The ripple effects cascade down through the ranks as junior officers learn that expertise matters less than compliance. Slotkin's analysis forces an uncomfortable conclusion. America may be witnessing the transformation of its military leadership from professional advisors to political loyalists. That transformation has consequences that extend far beyond any single administration, because rebuilding institutional independence takes decades, not. The 41,000 people serving under strategic command deserve leaders who prioritize mission success over political survival. So does the Constitution those leaders swore to defend.